When we analyze a text, we break it into its parts and look at the different pieces. At the center of any text is the author or the writer or the person who's telling the story. They have a purpose, and that from that purpose, everything else arises. So your author's purpose tells us why the person wrote the story. From the author's purpose comes different aspects of the text. The first of these that we can talk about is the theme. These are the main ideas. For example, if I was telling a story or writing a story about my life, I might want to discuss the strong relationship I had with my mother. That would be a theme in my text. But I might also want to talk about how I felt separate from my friends and felt alienated. That would also be a theme from the text. In addition to theme, an important part of the text are the characters. And part of the characters is their relationships. The way characters grow and change is all part of what we look at or explore when we're looking at a text. Further to characters, an important aspect of a text is always conflict. This doesn't necessarily mean that there's conflict between characters, but sometimes it can mean that there's conflict within a character, or a character might have conflict with ideas or the world. So in every text, there is an aspect of conflict that we need to look at. The place and time we call the setting. The setting is really important because it's a context in which everything is set. It's important to understand the context or the setting when you study a text. This text would be very different if it was written in another country, for example. You may be studying about a text that was written in England, but if it had been set in India, it would be a very different text. Another aspect of the text that's really important is a structure. And with the structure, I'm going to write the plot. The plot is your storyline, and the structure is the way that it's put together. For example, if you're reading a text and it's written in time order, we'd say it's chronological. That means it goes from the beginning to the end. But in some cases, for example, your shoes, the structure is quite different. It moves backwards and forwards between time. Another aspect of the plot that's important is the narrative voice. This means who's telling the story. It could be first person, in which case the story will be told I, using the pronoun I. But it could also be third person. And that's where we see a broader viewpoint of all the different characters. In the case of your shoes that we've been studying, this is very much the narrative voice is what we call spoken thought or stream of consciousness, where we're inside the character's head, hearing their perspective on the world. Another aspect of the text that's important is symbols or motifs. Symbols are representations of ideas or things in the text that are used to create images. They're quite powerful. Sometimes a symbol will be used throughout the text, in which case we might call that a motif. Now it's important we start to look at the language of the text. Language is absolutely key in the text. So if we're going to be looking at language, there are many aspects of language that we want to study. Now, the way the writer expresses the ideas, they do this by using the language really carefully. When we're looking at language, we can be just looking at the vocabulary, the use of the words that the writer chooses. Words are very powerful, and the choice of words will always give you a very clear idea of what the writer is trying to say. Another aspect of language that we look at is the structure, the sentences, the sentence structure. Are they short sentences, long sentences, complex sentences? The use of sentences, the way it's written, it says a lot about the topic and the writer's ideas. Another aspect that's really important and key in analysing a text are language features. Now, language features are the aspects of the text that create really powerful images. And so, imagery is created through language features. And this is a really important part of the text that we're going to study. Finally, one thing that we really need to be aware of regarding the author's purpose is the tone. The writer writes with an attitude or feeling about the subject matter. We call that tone. And this is made up or shown through a lot of other aspects of the text. They all influence tone. So the tone is the attitude of the writer or author to the subject. Now, the last thing that you may sometimes see is the word style. And style refers to the way something is written. Now, style is a combination of the use of language, the use of symbols, the narrative voice, the structure. All these aspects make up what we call style. In the next video, we'll look more closely at how we can interpret a question that we might get about the text in the final examination.